The morning mist hung low over the private airfield at Farnborough as Inspector James Morrison of the Royal Protection Unit stepped out of his unmarked vehicle. His radio crackled with static as he adjusted his earpiece, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. 3 days had passed since the discovery that several pieces of the late Queen's most precious royal regalia had vanished from the Tower of London's secure vaults, and the investigation had led him to this moment. Morrison had served the Crown for over 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this case. The missing items weren't just valuable artifacts, they were symbols of centuries of British monarchy, irreplaceable pieces that connected the present royal family to generations of kings and queens before them. Among the stolen treasures was the Queen's personal diamond brooch, a gift from her beloved father, King George VI, and a rare ceremonial sword that had been used in coronations for over 3 centuries. The tip had come from an unexpected source. A maintenance worker at the airfield had noticed unusual activity around a private jet registered under a shell company. What caught his attention wasn't just the late-night arrivals and departures, but the fact that several individuals in expensive suits had been seen carrying small, ornate boxes to and from the aircraft. When security footage was reviewed, facial recognition software had identified one of the regular passengers as Thomas Parker Bowles, the stepson of the new King Charles III. Morrison's team had been tracking financial transactions linked to several offshore accounts, and the pattern that emerged was troubling. Large sums of money had been moving between accounts in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg, all tied to the same shell company that owned the private jet. The amounts were staggering, enough to fund a small country's annual budget, and the timing coincided perfectly with the theft from the Tower of London. As Morrison approached the gleaming white Gulfstream jet parked on the tarmac, he couldn't help but feel a mix of anxiety and determination. Thomas Parker Bowles had always lived a life of privilege, but he had also maintained a relatively clean reputation. He was known for his work as a food critic and his charitable endeavors, making the connection to this crime all the more puzzling and potentially explosive for the royal family. The aircraft's engines were still warm, suggesting it had recently landed from somewhere abroad. Morrison's intelligence suggested the jet had been making regular flights to Geneva, a city known for its private banks and discreet storage facilities. The Swiss authorities had been cooperating with the investigation, but the web of shell companies and false identities had made tracking the stolen regalia extremely challenging. Detective Sarah Williams, Morrison's trusted partner, emerged from the customs office with a stack of documents. Her expression was grim as she approached him across the windswept tarmac. Williams had been investigating art and antiquities theft for over a decade, and her expertise in tracking stolen cultural artifacts had proven invaluable in this case. She had discovered that several pieces matching the description of the missing royal regalia had appeared on the international black market in recent weeks. The paperwork Williams carried included flight logs, passenger manifests, and customs declarations that painted a picture of suspicious activity. The jet had made 17 international flights in the past month, an unusual number for what was supposed to be a private recreational aircraft. More concerning was the fact that several of these flights had departed from small private airfields where security was minimal and record-keeping was often incomplete. Morrison's radio buzzed with an update from headquarters. Additional evidence had emerged from the Tower of London investigation. Security cameras that had been mysteriously malfunctioning during the theft had been restored, and new footage revealed that the perpetrators had inside knowledge of the security systems. Someone with access to the highest levels of the royal household had provided detailed information about guard rotations, alarm codes, and the location of the most valuable pieces. The investigation had also uncovered a network of art dealers and private collectors who specialized in items with royal provenance. These individuals operated in the shadows of the legitimate art world, arranging private sales for wealthy clients who valued secrecy over legality. The amounts being offered for genuine royal artifacts had reached astronomical levels, creating a powerful incentive for theft even among those who should have been protectors of the crown's treasures. As Morrison and Williams prepared to board the aircraft for their search, they were joined by Agent Michael Harrison from the Serious Fraud Office. Harrison had been tracking the financial aspects of the case and had uncovered evidence of money laundering on a massive scale. The stolen regalia represented only a small portion of a much larger criminal enterprise that involved the trafficking of cultural artifacts from around the world. The search warrant in Morrison's briefcase authorized a complete examination of the aircraft, its contents, and any storage compartments that might contain stolen property. The legal groundwork had been carefully laid to ensure that any evidence discovered would be admissible in court. The implications of this search extended far beyond the immediate crime. The reputation of the royal family and the integrity of Britain's cultural heritage hung in the balance. Harrison briefed the team on the latest financial intelligence. Bank records showed that substantial payments had been made to several individuals with connections to the Tower of London's security staff. These payments coincided with changes in guard duty rosters and maintenance schedules, suggesting a carefully coordinated inside job. The conspiracy appeared to involve multiple levels of the royal household's infrastructure, making it one of the most serious security breaches in modern British history. The morning air was crisp and cold as Morrison climbed the steps of the private jet. The aircraft's interior was luxuriously appointed, with leather seats, mahogany trim, and crystal decanters. Everything spoke of wealth and privilege, making the suspected criminal activity all the more shocking. As he began the methodical search process, Morrison couldn't help but think about the irony of pursuing a member of the royal family's extended circle in connection with crimes against the crown itself. Williams focused her attention on the aircraft's hidden compartments and storage areas. Her experience had taught her that smugglers often used sophisticated concealment methods, and private jets offered numerous possibilities for hiding contraband. The aircraft's sophisticated entertainment system, climate control units, and even the upholstered seating could potentially conceal small but extremely valuable items like the missing royal regalia. As the search progressed, the team discovered several items that raised immediate suspicions. Hidden in a compartment behind the aircraft's bar was a collection of documents written in multiple languages, including German, French, and Russian. These papers appeared to be provenance records and authenticity certificates for various antiques and artworks, suggesting an international network of cultural property trafficking that extended far beyond the current case. The discovery of specialized packaging materials designed for transporting delicate artifacts provided further evidence of criminal activity. These materials were specifically designed to protect valuable objects during air transport, and their presence in the aircraft suggested that the jet had been used regularly for moving stolen cultural property. The sophistication of the operation indicated professional criminals with extensive experience in art theft and international smuggling. Harrison's examination of the aircraft's communication systems revealed encrypted satellite communication equipment that went far beyond what would be expected for normal private jet operations. This equipment could be used to coordinate criminal activities across international borders while avoiding detection by law enforcement agencies. The encryption systems were military-grade, suggesting connections to organized crime networks with substantial resources and technical expertise. As the search continued, Morrison received an urgent message from headquarters. Interpol had issued alerts about similar thefts at museums and royal collections across Europe. The pattern suggested an organized criminal network that specialized in stealing items with royal or noble provenance. The network appeared to have clients who specifically sought artifacts that had belonged to European royal families, and they were willing to pay extraordinary sums for authentic pieces. The investigation was revealing a criminal enterprise of unprecedented scope and sophistication. The theft of the Queen's royal regalia appeared to be just one operation in a much larger scheme that threatened cultural heritage institutions across Europe. The criminals involved had demonstrated remarkable patience and planning ability, spending months or even years infiltrating the security systems of their targets before executing their thefts. Williams called Morrison over to examine something she had discovered in the aircraft's sophisticated climate control system. Hidden within the ventilation ducts was a collection of small, wrapped packages that had been carefully concealed from casual inspection. The packages were wrapped in acid-free tissue paper and protective foam, the kind of materials used by museums and auction houses to preserve delicate artifacts during transport. The first package Williams unwrapped contained what appeared to be an ornate golden medallion bearing the coat of arms of the British royal family. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with intricate engravings and precious stones that caught the morning sunlight streaming through the aircraft's windows. Morrison immediately recognized it as one of the pieces listed in the theft report from the Tower of London, and his heart raced with the implications of this discovery. Additional packages revealed more stolen treasures, each more precious than the last. A diamond-encrusted brooch that had belonged to Queen Victoria, a ceremonial sword with a jeweled hilt, and several rings that bore the personal insignia of recent monarchs were all carefully wrapped and hidden within the aircraft. The total value of the recovered items was estimated in the tens of millions of pounds, but their cultural and historical significance was truly priceless. As Morrison documented each discovery, he couldn't help but feel a mix of triumph and sadness. The recovery of these irreplaceable artifacts was a victory for law enforcement and for the preservation of British cultural heritage. However, the involvement of someone connected to the royal family itself made this case particularly painful and potentially damaging to the institution of the monarchy. The evidence was overwhelming, and the implications were staggering. The search of Thomas Parker Bowles's private jet had uncovered not just the stolen royal regalia, but evidence of an international criminal network that threatened cultural institutions across Europe. As Morrison prepared to expand the investigation, he knew that this case would likely become one of the most significant cultural property crimes in modern history, with ramifications that would be felt for years to come. The secure briefing room at Scotland Yard was filled with tension as Morrison and his expanded team gathered around the conference table. The discovery of the stolen royal regalia had triggered a full-scale investigation that now involved multiple law enforcement agencies from across Europe. Photographs of the recovered artifacts were spread across the table, each piece tagged and catalogued with meticulous care. The room's electronic security systems hummed quietly, ensuring that sensitive details of the investigation remained confidential. Detective Chief Inspector Patricia Hamilton, Morrison's superior, had taken personal control of the case. Her 30 years of experience in high-profile investigations had taught her that crimes involving the royal family required exceptional discretion and thoroughness. The media attention alone could destabilize public confidence in the monarchy if not handled carefully. She had authorized additional resources and personnel, transforming what began as a routine theft investigation into one of the most complex criminal cases in recent British history. The forensic analysis of the recovered regalia had revealed disturbing details about the criminal network's sophistication. Each piece had been carefully cleaned and treated to remove traces of their original location, suggesting professional knowledge of evidence preservation techniques. However, advanced forensic science had still managed to extract microscopic traces of materials unique to the Tower of London, confirming beyond doubt that these were indeed the stolen royal treasures. Agent Harrison's financial investigation had uncovered a web of transactions that spanned dozens of countries and involved hundreds of millions of pounds. The money trail led through legitimate businesses, charitable foundations, and offshore banking systems that had been carefully constructed to obscure the ultimate sources and destinations of the funds. Computer specialists working around the clock had begun to decode the encrypted communication systems found on the private jet, revealing messages that confirmed the existence of an international conspiracy. The breakthrough came when Swiss authorities, working in cooperation with British investigators, raided a private storage facility in Geneva that had been identified through the financial records. The facility contained dozens of stolen cultural artifacts from museums and royal collections across Europe. Paintings, sculptures, jewelry, and ceremonial objects worth hundreds of millions of euros were discovered in climate-controlled storage units registered under false names and shell companies. Dr. Elizabeth Thornton, the Royal Collection's chief curator, had been brought in to authenticate and assess the recovered items. Her expertise in royal artifacts and their historical significance proved invaluable as the investigation expanded. She had spent 2 days examining each piece with advanced scientific equipment, documenting their condition and confirming their provenance. Her preliminary report indicated that some of the artifacts had been missing for years, suggesting that the theft from the Tower of London was just the latest in a series of crimes targeting royal collections. The investigation had also revealed connections between the stolen artifacts and several high-profile auctions that had taken place in recent years. Legitimate auction houses in London, Paris, and New York had unknowingly sold pieces that matched the description of items reported stolen from various royal collections. The criminals had been using sophisticated forgery techniques to create false provenance documentation, allowing them to sell genuine artifacts through legitimate channels while maintaining plausible deniability. Morrison's team had been working 18-hour days to track down all the individuals connected to the private jet and its suspicious activities. Passenger manifests revealed a network of art dealers, wealthy collectors, and individuals with connections to European nobility who had been using the aircraft for regular travel. Many of these individuals claimed ignorance of any criminal activity, but financial records and communication intercepts told a different story. The political implications of the case had grown exponentially as evidence emerged of the conspiracy's scope. The involvement of someone connected to the royal family threatened to create a constitutional crisis, and government officials at the highest levels had begun receiving regular briefings on the investigation's progress. The Prime Minister's office had quietly assembled a crisis management team to prepare for potential public disclosure of the case's most sensitive details. Interpol had issued international arrest warrants for several individuals identified as key figures in the criminal network. These included a mysterious art dealer known only as the Collector, who appeared to be the network's primary broker, arranging sales between thieves and wealthy buyers who were willing to pay premium prices for stolen royal artifacts. Electronic surveillance had captured conversations in which the Collector discussed specific pieces from the British Royal Collection, proving advanced knowledge of the Tower of London theft. The investigation had also uncovered evidence that the criminal network had been operating for at least a decade, systematically targeting royal collections across Europe. Similar thefts had occurred in Spain, Belgium, Sweden, and Denmark, all following the same pattern of inside knowledge and sophisticated execution. The criminals had demonstrated remarkable patience, sometimes spending years infiltrating the security systems of their targets before striking at the most opportune moments. Williams had been analyzing the communication patterns of the suspected criminals and had discovered that they used a sophisticated code system to discuss their operations. References to dinner parties actually meant theft operations, while recipes referred to specific artifacts targeted for stealing. Kitchen equipment was code for the specialized tools and techniques used to bypass security systems. This coded language had allowed the criminals to coordinate their activities while avoiding detection by law enforcement surveillance. The search of additional properties connected to the investigation had yielded more evidence of the network's extensive operations. A warehouse in Hamburg contained specialized equipment for creating forgeries and altering existing artifacts to obscure their origins. Computer servers found in the facility contained databases of wealthy collectors who had expressed interest in acquiring items with royal provenance, regardless of their legal status. Psychological profilers brought in to analyze the criminal network had concluded that the operation was led by individuals with extensive knowledge of art history and royal collections. The selection of specific items for theft demonstrated sophisticated understanding of their cultural significance and market value. The criminals had targeted pieces that would be particularly appealing to collectors who valued exclusivity and historical importance over legal acquisition. The role of Thomas Parker Bowles in the conspiracy remained unclear, but evidence suggested that he might have been manipulated or coerced rather than being a willing participant. Financial records showed unusual pressure on his business interests, and intercepted communications indicated that he might have been threatened by the criminal network. However, his continued use of the private jet for transporting stolen artifacts made his level of knowledge and complicity a critical question for the investigation. Advanced computer analysis had revealed that the criminals had been using artificial intelligence and machine learning systems to identify potential targets and plan their operations. The sophistication of their technology rivaled that of major corporations, suggesting substantial financial backing and access to cutting-edge criminal expertise. The network appeared to be part of a larger criminal enterprise involved in multiple types of high-value theft and fraud. The investigation had also uncovered evidence of corruption within several European cultural institutions. Security guards, curators, and administrative staff had received payments in exchange for providing inside information about security systems and valuable collections. The scope of this corruption was so extensive that it threatened public confidence in the ability of museums and cultural institutions to protect their collections from theft. Intelligence agencies from multiple countries had become involved in the case as evidence emerged of connections between the art theft network and other criminal organizations involved in arms trafficking, money laundering, and international terrorism. The sophisticated financial infrastructure used to support the art theft operations had also been used to fund other illegal activities, making the case a matter of national security for several European governments. Morrison received word that additional evidence had been discovered in a raid on a private estate in the French countryside. Hidden in a secret room behind a library was a collection of stolen artifacts from royal collections across Europe, including pieces that had been missing for decades. The estate was registered under a shell company that traced back to the same financial network identified in the British investigation. The owner of the French estate was a reclusive billionaire who had made his fortune in the technology industry but had developed an obsession with collecting items connected to European royalty. His private collection included not only stolen artifacts, but also detailed records of royal family genealogies and personal information about current members of various royal households. The depth of his knowledge about royal families and their possessions was both impressive and disturbing. As the investigation continued to expand, Morrison found himself coordinating with law enforcement agencies from over a dozen countries. The international scope of the criminal network required unprecedented cooperation between agencies that normally operated independently. Language barriers, different legal systems, and varying approaches to criminal investigation created challenges that tested the limits of international law enforcement cooperation. The pressure to resolve the case quickly was enormous, given the potential for political and diplomatic consequences. However, the complexity of the criminal network and the need to build airtight legal cases against all involved parties meant that the investigation would likely continue for months or even years. Each new discovery revealed additional layers of the conspiracy and more individuals who had played roles in the systematic theft of Europe's cultural heritage. The recovery of the British royal regalia was just the beginning of what promised to be one of the most significant cultural property crime investigations in modern history. As Morrison prepared for the next phase of the investigation, He knew that uncovering the full truth about this criminal network would require extraordinary dedication and international cooperation on an unprecedented scale. 6 months after the discovery of the stolen royal regalia on Thomas Parker Bowles's private jet, the courtroom at the Old Bailey was packed with reporters, legal representatives, and observers from around the world. The trial that would conclude the largest cultural property theft investigation in European history was about to begin. Morrison sat in the witness gallery, his notebook filled with details from the complex investigation that had consumed his life for the better part of a year. The final breakthrough in the case had come from an unexpected source. Marcus Thornfield, a former employee of the technology billionaire's French estate, had contacted British authorities with crucial information about the criminal network's operations. Thornfield's conscience had finally overcome his fear of retribution, and his testimony would prove to be the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. His detailed knowledge of the network's structure and operations provided investigators with the final pieces needed to build comprehensive legal cases against all major participants. Thomas Parker Bowles had ultimately been cleared of criminal charges after investigators determined that he had been an unwitting victim of the criminal network rather than a willing participant. The evidence revealed that his financial difficulties had made him vulnerable to manipulation by criminals who offered to help resolve his debts in exchange for the use of his private jet. His lack of knowledge about the stolen artifacts being transported on his aircraft had been confirmed through extensive interrogation and psychological evaluation. The true mastermind behind the international art theft network was revealed to be Dr. Heinrich Waldmann, the reclusive technology billionaire whose French estate had yielded so much evidence. Waldmann had used his vast fortune and technological expertise to create a sophisticated criminal enterprise that targeted royal collections across Europe. His obsession with European royalty had driven him to acquire artifacts by any means necessary, regardless of their legal status or cultural significance. The investigation had ultimately identified over 300 stolen artifacts worth more than 2 billion euros that had been trafficked through Waldmann's network over the course of 15 years. Royal collections in 12 countries had been victimized, along with dozens of museums and private collections. The scope of the criminal enterprise had far exceeded even the investigators' most pessimistic estimates when the case began with the discovery of missing items from the Tower of London. Dr. Thornton's continued examination of the recovered artifacts had revealed that many pieces had been subjected to illegal modifications and alterations. Some had been broken apart to make them easier to transport and conceal, while others had been artificially aged or had their identifying marks removed. These modifications had not only facilitated their theft and transport, but had also significantly reduced their cultural and historical value, representing an irreparable loss to European cultural heritage. The financial investigation had traced criminal proceeds through over 50 countries and had resulted in the freezing of assets worth more than 5 billion euros. The complexity of the money laundering operation had required the development of new investigative techniques and international cooperation agreements that would serve as models for future cases involving transnational organized crime. Several major banks had faced substantial fines for their failure to detect and report suspicious transactions related to the criminal network. Williams had been promoted to Detective Chief Inspector in recognition of her outstanding work on the case. Her expertise in art crime investigation had proved invaluable, and she had been assigned to lead a new international task force dedicated to combating cultural property theft. The task force would coordinate efforts between law enforcement agencies across Europe and would work to prevent future crimes against cultural heritage institutions. The trial proceedings had revealed shocking details about the extent of corruption within cultural institutions across Europe. Over 40 individuals, including museum directors, security personnel, and government officials, had been arrested for their roles in facilitating the thefts. The betrayal of public trust by these individuals had prompted comprehensive reviews of security procedures and personnel screening processes at cultural institutions throughout Europe. Agent Harrison's work on the financial aspects of the case had led to significant changes in international banking regulations and money laundering detection systems. His innovative techniques for tracking criminal proceeds through complex offshore financial structures had been adopted by law enforcement agencies worldwide. The case had demonstrated the critical importance of financial intelligence in combating sophisticated international criminal organizations. The recovery of stolen artifacts had been a massive logistical undertaking involving experts from museums and cultural institutions across Europe. Each piece required careful examination, documentation, and conservation before it could be returned to its rightful location. The process had taken months and had involved specialists in art conservation, authentication, and historical research who worked to ensure that every recovered artifact was properly identified and restored. The return of the British royal regalia to the Tower of London had been conducted with appropriate ceremony, but the security arrangements had been completely overhauled based on lessons learned from the theft. New surveillance systems, enhanced personnel screening procedures, and improved coordination with law enforcement agencies had been implemented to prevent future security breaches. The royal family had expressed their gratitude for the recovery of these irreplaceable symbols of British monarchy. Morrison had been awarded the Queen's Police Medal for his exceptional service in leading the investigation. However, he found the personal satisfaction of recovering stolen cultural artifacts to be more meaningful than any official recognition. The case had demonstrated the importance of protecting cultural heritage, not just as valuable property, but as irreplaceable links to human history and identity that belong to all humanity. The psychological evaluation of Waldman had revealed a complex individual whose obsession with European royalty had gradually evolved into criminal behavior. Mental health experts testified that his vast wealth and social isolation had contributed to a distorted worldview in which he believed himself entitled to possess whatever artifacts he desired. His elaborate criminal network had been both a means to acquire these items and an expression of his need to demonstrate power and control over others. The international cooperation that had been necessary to resolve the case had led to the establishment of new treaties and agreements for combating transnational cultural property crime. The European Union had adopted new legislation strengthening penalties for cultural property theft and improving information sharing between member states. UNESCO had also developed new protocols for protecting cultural heritage sites and collections from organized criminal enterprises. The broader impact of the case extended far beyond the criminal justice system. Museums and cultural institutions worldwide had implemented enhanced security measures and improved staff training programs. Academic institutions had developed new courses and research programs focused on cultural heritage protection and art crime investigation. The case had raised public awareness about the vulnerability of cultural collections and the importance of protecting them for future generations. The media coverage of the case had been extensive, but careful coordination between law enforcement agencies and government officials had ensured that sensitive information about ongoing investigations and security procedures remained confidential. The public's interest in the case had actually increased support for cultural institutions and heritage protection programs, leading to increased funding for museum security and conservation programs. Thomas Parker Bowles had emerged from the investigation with his reputation intact, but the experience had been traumatic for him and his family. The royal family had provided support throughout the ordeal, and he had subsequently become an advocate for improved security measures at cultural institutions. His experience as an unwitting victim of sophisticated criminals had given him unique insights into how legitimate individuals could be manipulated and exploited by criminal organizations. The sentencing phase of the trial had resulted in substantial prison terms for the major participants in the criminal network. Waldman received a 30-year sentence, while other key figures received terms ranging from 5 to 20 years. The courts had also ordered the forfeiture of all assets connected to the criminal enterprise, ensuring that the defendants would not benefit financially from their crimes, even after serving their prison sentences. The technological aspects of the criminal network had led to new research into the use of artificial intelligence and advanced computing systems by criminal organizations. Cybersecurity experts had developed new methods for detecting and preventing the use of sophisticated technology for criminal purposes. The case had demonstrated that modern criminals could have access to resources and capabilities that rivaled those of legitimate businesses and government agencies. The successful resolution of the case had restored public confidence in the ability of law enforcement agencies to protect cultural heritage, but it had also highlighted the ongoing vulnerability of cultural institutions to sophisticated criminal enterprises. The international nature of modern art crime required continued cooperation between agencies and ongoing vigilance to prevent future thefts of irreplaceable cultural artifacts. As Morrison reflected on the case while leaving the courthouse after the final sentencing, he was struck by the complexity of modern criminal organizations and the challenges they presented to traditional law enforcement approaches. The recovery of the royal regalia had been just the beginning of a much larger effort to protect cultural heritage from criminal exploitation. The techniques and international cooperation frameworks developed during the investigation would serve as valuable tools for combating similar crimes in the future. The case had demonstrated that protecting cultural heritage required more than just physical security measures. It required international cooperation, advanced investigative techniques, and a commitment to preserving these irreplaceable artifacts for future generations. The successful recovery of hundreds of stolen artifacts and the dismantling of a major criminal network represented a significant victory. But Morrison knew that the fight to protect cultural heritage would continue as long as there were criminals willing to exploit these treasures for personal gain. The royal regalia now safely returned to their proper place in the Tower of London. Morrison could finally consider this chapter of his career complete, knowing that his work had helped preserve an irreplaceable part of human cultural heritage for generations to come.